Hello everyone, welcome back to Call of Duty DFS Action Breakdown for August 4th. Obviously this is the beginning of COD Champs. I think will only get like 2 or 3 DK slates out of it, but should be an exciting tournament either way. Yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. So Bovada's down, which is usually what we use for odds, but this will work just the same. As we could tell, 3 pretty close, tight series, and then one pretty relatively one-sided series in the LA Thieves versus Boston Breach. But this should be pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to this one, so we'll go ahead and get started. So first series up is London versus Seattle. So two teams that have been wildly kind of across the board, you could say. So far, just high highs, low lows for both of these teams. In terms of what we're looking at now, I don't know. It's pretty hard to gauge. It really is. So the last we saw from Seattle was them completely blowing up on LAN. I mean, relatively similar story for London. They got blown out on LAN as well. However, Seattle now are on a 5 series loss streak. Not the best look for them. London were picking it up and then fell off on LAN. So it's, again, pretty hard to kind of tell and gauge where we are at the moment with these teams. It is coming off a break. It's very odd that we don't have a season in between this. We go from one LAN to another. But this should be pretty exciting. Seattle, slight favorite, minus 125. I personally just kind of have a hard time getting there. I know the game is pretty random. Obviously, we've seen some crazy things from Seattle. Obviously, last time we saw London, they were looking pretty poor as well. So it's not ideal, really, from either sense. I'm not too high on either of these teams, I don't think personally. Although I think a little bit more... There's definitely some crazy upside that we can see from the Seattle side. We know that they... obviously they won a tournament, like they won one of the lands that we've been on, so obviously they do have that potential. However, we've just seen their the waves that they ride. They go up and down, and until we see some ups, we're just gonna have to assume that they're down. So yeah, that'll be it. I think I'm gonna slightly side with the London side here. It doesn't feel the best, but it is what it is. So yeah, I think this one I'm going to slightly lean towards London Royal Ravens, obviously heavily dictated by their hardpoint matchups here, and then their Search and Destroys. Although I do think Seattle are very likely to win the control. Obviously, the records of London 1-6 in control, Seattle 4-2 in control. That definitely does put a hindrance on this. When it comes to DK, what I'm looking at is some pretty cheap London players I'm definitely willing to get into my lineups. We know Pred's numbers are absolutely insane, so I wouldn't blame anyone to get there. Mac at 7.6 is actually pretty cheap as well, so I would not blame anyone to look at players like Pred and Mac. However, I just think the cheap players that you're getting on the London side, I think particularly obviously Zero and Afro, I think they're both going to be relatively decently owned, but that's not going to scare me away. Overall, I don't want to go too crazy on this series. Obviously, we know London are perma-banning. They always ban out that bocage. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm not really scared of Seattle on any of the other maps as well. Obviously, the Bocage is 2 of their 3 hardpoint wins that they've had so far, and that's getting eliminated in the ban phase. So their only hope really is either that Berlin or the Tuscan. And obviously, if we look at the London side, the Berlin is 3-3. That's not the best, but their Tuscan is 6-1. Obviously, Seattle banned the Gavutu all the time, so we will not be having that. I do think this is an extremely straightforward match. We will have a Berlin and a Tuscan hardpoint. I think Tuscan will go heavily in favor of London. Obviously, they're 6-1 on it. Seattle's 0-1 on it. Very large difference there. And then Berlin 1-3 for Seattle, 3-3 for London. Obviously, not an insane one-sided favor towards London. However, again, they've played it more times. They have more wins on it. They're much obviously better, I think, in that stage. And obviously, when it comes down to winning the series, at least, I think I think London should win the Search and Destroys. I think that sets them up for a pretty solid 3-1 victory. I think they'll win both of the hard points in the second game, map 2, Search and Destroy. And I think they'll lose the control to Seattle as well. Although, if London start the series up 2-0, maybe some morale negativity comes in for Seattle. Maybe London have been working on their controls, so maybe that's a thing to keep in mind as well. I just feel like a lot of the things are in the side of London, and yeah, that's going to be it. One thing I forgot to mention at the start that I did want to touch on is every single LAN that we've had so far has had a different winner. I don't know if you necessarily want to completely stick with this, but it's something to keep in mind. So Major 1 is in the home, I guess, arena of Optic Texas in Texas, in Arlington. Optic Texas win that. Major 2, it is the Minnesota Rocker one up in Minnesota. LAG go ahead and win that. The Pro-Am Classic, I don't know if you fully want to count this, but was in Columbus, New York, won that. Major 3 was the Toronto Ultra one. Seattle went and won that. Then Major 4 in New York, LA Thieves went ahead and won that. So we've had different winners. That just kind of speaks to the variance and the difference of this game. We know it's very heavily we know it's very heavily I guess momentum based is kind of the way I'm trying to word it. It's, we see these teams who get hot and then stay hot and they play well. It's very emotionally momentum based at the moment, and that's something we've definitely seen come in to factor with. And for this series, or for this not for this series, but for this whole tournament, it's going to be very hard to get a gauge on that stuff in advance, because the last time we've seen them, it's been a little bit. The last time we saw them was just Major 4, so we're looking at nearly half a month off. They haven't been playing games at all. I mean, professional games at all, or they've been playing, I'm sure, practicing and all that kind of stuff, but they have not been playing official matches for a few months or a few weeks now. So for that reason, I think we're going to have to use a little bit more guesswork, and I'm willing to bet on London improving in the controls. Obviously, it does scare me that Seattle is coming in with a little bit of a break as well. However, I just have a feeling with London here. I feel like London is going to be a team that's pretty slept on. So that's one I'm actually willing to buy into a good bit here. Yeah, that'll be it for that one. The next series up is LA Thieves versus the Boston Breach. So LA Thieves are coming off of that Major 4 victory. Looked pretty good in it as well. It's very hard to argue against it. They started coming on pretty strong. They've looked very good as of late, and it definitely feels like it's a hard sell to go anywhere else. I am going to be siding with the LA Thieves side here, although it's going to be a little bit tentative, especially compared to their price tag. LA Thieves minus 270 or 370 is a very, very rich for me. I think this. The thing to note here is that LA Thieves are another one of the Bocage banned teams, so that's going to eliminate a solid 4-win map for Boston. Boston will probably most likely go ahead and ban either the Gavutu or the Tuscan, but that leaves them with another map that they're not too skilled on, and I think Boston will go ahead and get to the Berlin. So if we're looking at no Bocage, and then I would assume Boston either, you could definitely make a case either way for what Boston would ban, either the Tuscan. LA Thieves don't have a great record on it, 4-5, but that's still 9 times they've played it, and 4-5 is not that bad, especially when you're 0-1 on it. That means you're not playing it, you're scared to play it, and the one time you did play it, you lost. And then the other option is the Gavutu, where LA Thieves have never banned it. They're always confident on that map. They're 2-0 on it as of late. They rarely get to play it, but when they do, they win. Then obviously Boston 1-3 on it, so they do feel a little bit more comfortable on that, but again, their record is much, much worse. So it definitely feels like there's going to be a very solid map there for LA Thieves with either the Gavutu or the Tuscan. Then the Berlin should be a little bit closer. 4-1 for Boston, 4-2 for LA. Although I like LA Thieves on Berlin. I feel like they've looked very strong on that map as well. And obviously, when it comes down to the Search and Destroy, pretty close, but slight edge to the LA Thieves. But again, not too big of a worry for the DK side of it, outside of the team slot. And the Control is very, very, very one-sided towards the LA Thieves. So I could definitely see LA Thieves getting a sweep, maybe a 3-1 here, although the price tag just feels a little crazy to me, just because, like other things I just mentioned, how the we're coming off a break. This game is very random. A lot of things can change, and I don't feel like paying that much of a price tag for an LA Thieves team that really has only shown us good stuff as of late. And it's not like we're not getting an Atlanta FaZe style team of pure dominance or like a dynasty level caliber team where we have a big amount of reliability to fall back on. This LA Thieves team, although their names are very strong, obviously, they just have not been as impressive this entire year. That's the only hesitancy. But I'm definitely willing to lock and load some LA Thieves here. Draza, Kenny, Octane would be the ones I'd like to get to. Envoy is just continuously insanely priced, so he would probably be the one I would look to avoid, but either way. Then up next is Toronto versus Optic Texas. So this one is going to be very, very interesting. So odds-wise, Optic Texas -150. I do think that that makes a little bit of sense here. I'm pretty intrigued by this. Obviously, last time out they played, it was a 2-3 victory towards Optic Texas in losers round 1. That's weird that they don't have another match here, because if they won a match, then they should be playing another one. Obviously, we know Optic ended up losing. Again, this is one where it's really hard to kind of gauge. Optic Texas are a team that have been kind of underperforming a lot lately. The expectations for this team are very, very high. Obviously, they're kind of akin to FaZe in that matter, where they're expected to do very, very well. They just have not been doing so, and I do think this is one where you're going to have to pick a side, and I'm really unsure where to go with this one. I think this is one where we could definitely see a bocage happen. So Toronto either ban Bocage or Gavutu. However, I think last time out they ended up playing Optic on the Bocage, if memory serves. But Optic typically are going with the Berlin ban at the moment. I do think that would make sense for them. So we're going to not see the Berlin happen here. And then Toronto will either ban the Bocage or the Gavutu. I would imagine they go to the Gavutu ban just because Optic have been 3-6 on Bocage. It's just not a map that they've been good on. A lot of problems there. So I would imagine we get a very, very strong map set here of the Bocage and the Tuscan. But again, it's not like Toronto's stats are that great either. We do have a 0-2 Bocage here and a 2-4 Tuscan. We have a 3-6 Bocage and a 2-2 Tuscan. So numbers slightly in favor of Optic Texas, but then we take a look over at the control. Optic are 2-7, Toronto are 5-3, so a little bit better over on the Toronto side. So I do think this is a very close series. I do think you could definitely make a good case to argue either way here. I think I'm going to slightly lean towards the Toronto side. I know this is probably going to be pretty unpopular. I do expect Optic to be probably a solidly owned pick here, because they do have the big names, the big numbers, all that kind of stuff. However, I feel like this could be a slightly sneaky Toronto side here. Again, very good map pool. We talked about that. We talked about this in the last episode, or the last video that we talked about, how these Toronto submachine gun players have been coming online a little bit. We've seen in their last few matches, like maybe the last 3, 4, 5 matches or so, we've seen that their SMGs have been coming online. Kleenex and Bance, they need bigger performances from those two, and I think we've been getting better performances from them. So I'm very comfortable to go with the Toronto side. Obviously, I will talk about the players at the end, but Insight and Cammy would be the two. You could definitely make a good case to look at one of these cheap Toronto players of Bance or Kleenex, because their engagement rate is very, very high. Last series up is the Atlanta FaZe versus the New York Subliners. So pretty intriguing one here as well. Obviously, Atlanta FaZe, the team that's been to every final except for one, but they have yet to win anything this year, I should say. They won pretty much everything last year, but nonetheless, two pretty intriguing ones here. Off the bat, I kind of feel pretty good with New York. I just feel like FaZe are kind of continuously getting the rub here. Granted, they have been doing well. As you can see, their last time out on land, they lost to LA Thieves twice. Obviously, the eventual winners. So and we could definitely see here with New York, they beat LA Thieves once, lost to them again, then they lost to LA Thieves earlier in the regular season. So Two very, very strong teams. I do think this is going to be very, very close. You could definitely make a good case to go either way. I wouldn't argue with you really at all. I do think New York is going to be probably the more heavier owned team. Hydra at 8K, Paulex at 6.6. Those two are simply mispriced. It makes a lot of sense that people are going to go to them pretty heavily. We do have Atlanta Phase minus 167, so that is why. However, I think this is just going to be an eat the chalk spot here for me. We know New York are most likely going to ban the Kabuto. That's typically what they look to ban out. We know Atlanta FaZe will look to ban the Berlin. So we will be looking at the ideal map set here once again of having a Bocage and Tuscan most likely. Both these teams comfortable on the Bocage. Both these teams comfortable on the on the Tuscan. I think this is a pretty straightforward Bocage Tuscan. Two, obviously, the best possible map set here. I do think this is going to be a pretty close series. I definitely think you can make a good case to go either way. Obviously, the odds say that as well. I just am willing to take the kind of chalk cheap New York players and go with them either way. I'd be interested to see where people are going to spend up their salary on. I'm personally going to look to probably just try and prioritize the LA Thieves, as maybe as bad as it sounds, but we do have a pretty expensive Seattle, and people like to play Pred. I know we have a pretty expensive Atlanta, and I know people love to play Celium. Texas is up there as well, Dashy at 10-2. So it doesn't feel great to fade arguably the three best players in the game of Dashy, Celium, and Pred. I do think those are without a doubt the three best players in the game. And fading all three of them will not feel right, but that's kind of what I'm feeling and the direction I'm headed. So yeah, obviously we look at the hard points here, very, very much in favor of New York. The control is very much in favor in FaZe, which does bring a little bit of a damper to that other side. And that's just kind of the difference maker here for me. I'm going to slightly lean towards this New York side, and I'm not going to feel great about it. But I just feel like FaZe is kind of getting a continual slight rub that maybe they shouldn't. Again, they're an all-time great dynasty. They've done very well the last two games. The last Call of Duty games, like they obviously were very dominant in the last Call of Duty Cold War. Then up here in Vanguard, they've been very dominant as well. However, I just feel like they're not quite as insanely dominant to where they're going to win so much that that I think quite dictates this one. I do think this is very close as well, but again, slightly lean towards this New York side. I do think they're going to be pretty popular because they are super underpriced, but I'm going to be fine eating that chalk either way. So as usual, we'll go ahead and look at the players' stats before we get out of here. I am going to set this parameters to the last couple of lands because we do have this big land here. This is the kind of what we're looking at for these teams for LAN. We're looking for their LAN performances. So New York, London, LA Thieves, and then obviously the last team up was Toronto that I'm going to be looking at. You guys can obviously take a look at the breakingpoint.gg player stats. You guys can look at this however you want to change to your own, but for me, this is how I'll be looking at it. Octane, Cammy, Insight, Hydra, Kenny, Draza are kind of a cut above everyone else. Envoy's not that bad. Obviously we see Afro's numbers are not that bad considering he is super cheap. Kismet's numbers are not the greatest, but he wouldn't mind mixing him in. Obviously Bance at a 0.92 kind of stands out a little bit to me as somebody who you could definitely make a case for. He's all the way at the minimum of 6K, I believe. Yep. I don't think I'd be afraid of that either. But Paulex, again, his numbers have not been the best, but I think he's pretty underpriced, and we definitely have seen some good performances from him. So yeah, I think overall the players I think are relatively straightforward. London, LA, Toronto, New York. I do think Insight, Cammy, Octane, Kenny, Hydra, Draza, Afro, maybe Kleenex, maybe Zero, probably Paulex, maybe Bance. That's probably going to be how my player pool is looking. So yeah, hopefully you guys got everything you could out of this one. I know it's not quite as full detailed video that we're usually doing, but there's really not much to go off of it, and this game does feel very random, so I don't want to waste your guys' time just kind of talking about nothing when I don't really have anything to say. So got everything out there that I was trying to get out, so hopefully you guys can have a pretty good day as well. So Yeah, that'll be it for me tonight. I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another Call of Duty video, but hopefully we will have some information. It'll probably be tomorrow late night after the games, so that obviously we will know who's playing and stuff. So it'll be a while, but I'll see you guys then, and thank you guys for tuning in.